Okay, in this tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to go through the basic fundamentals of modelling, the kind of basic do's and don'ts and things to look out for. In Max there's obviously various different ways we can model something, namely 2 or 3 ways that we normally go with. One is by using standard box modelling, which is, well, clues in the title. Basically what you do is you take a box, then literally using edit poly or editable poly, we can literally extrude parts, inset bits, extrude things in and out, and so on and so on, as you know, to our heart's content. Or we can literally select vertices, weld or collapse them together using various different tools that we have at our disposal. That's option 1. Option 2 is by using general splines, so we can literally just create basic shapes, and then using modifiers we can extrude let's just make sure that's actually capped off. It's actually looping back on itself, which is why it's not coming. It's not visible. So let's bring that back up. There we go. It's capped now. So, an additional way of modeling, we can basically just like create a basic shape as you would in AutoCAD, and then simply extrude it, which basically gives us a rough representation of a 3D object. So what we can do, obviously, if you notice here, we've got some like harsh polygon edges here. We can actually drop back down to the lower level, turning show and result on, which is this button here. We can increase the interpolation by either increasing the amount of steps, or we can make it adaptive, so it basically distributes them accordingly. So we get some on curved areas, we get some tighter edges, and on straight areas we've obviously got no additional detail required. So that's second main method that we use. An additional method that not many people do tend to use is what's called surface tools, and that is basically using spline cages to create 3D objects. Now it's literally creating, like for example, a hull of a boat. You basically create the main guides, and then applying a modifier, it will simply skin it. As with all types of modeling, we don't want to tend to mix quads and tris together. In essence, what I'm basically saying is don't have triangular faces mixed with square or rectangular faces, basically because if we come to mesh smooth or refine later on, then we're going to get some nasty pinching in the geometry, which looks like the bloody geometry has been put through a grinder. Case in point, let me just quickly create an object here, and I'll give you an ideal example what this problem looks like. Okay, so if I go to edit poly, and I'm just going to, let's just pull this out here. I'm going to target weld this guy to there. So what we're ended up with is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sided polygon there, 1, 2, 3 sided polygon there, 3 sided one there, 4 sided one there, and so on. So if I mesh smooth this, which goes and refines it, we can see that we're starting to get a little bit of pinching around this area. It's more apparent if I actually perform this operation at a corner. Let me simply target weld this guy, and then we'll go through and mesh smooth that again. So we see we're starting to get a little bit of pinching here. If I turn off isoline display, we can see why. We're getting this kind of stretching across here, and we're getting a pinch in the mesh. Now if I turn off edit poly, you can see that the actual, because we haven't got any of that editing in there, we haven't got any mixing of quads and tris, the distribution of the mesh smooth, the refinement, is even and nicely evenly spaced. Now this is one thing to look for when you're actually modeling. So if you do have any issues with your models, it's 9 times out of 10 is because of this particular type of problem. You basically mixed quads with tris. Even if they're very, very, very small, it can create a nasty bit of pinching. So let's have a quick go at creating something with surface tools, and then we'll create exactly the same kind of thing with box modeling and compare the two. So first off, with surface tools, what we're going to do is we're going to create a basic boat hull. So for this, what I need to do is I need to use, firstly I'm going to use grid snap points, and then I'm going to use vertex snap points to basically snap additional splines to vertex points. Now this will become apparent once I've actually got the main shape in, so let's just quickly undo that, and we'll draw out a spline that's going to give us the basic shape of our little boat. Closing spline, yes. And in vertex subobject mode in the line, I want to convert this to a Béchet. Then I'm going to level it out. Actually, let's do it to a smooth. Same deal with this guy here, and these as well. I can then convert all that lot to Béchet curves, and then, because they're not exactly level, I'm going to just scale those horizontally so it levels out the handles. Actually, that is one out, which is basically what's doing the problem. So you're scaled vertically, so are you, so that's correct. So that's basically the top template for our little boat. So what I need to do now is obviously create a depth to it. So I need to create another spline that kind of goes all the way around there. So to do this, I can just go to create line, and now I'm still using grid snap because I'm just going to be on this kind of Y plane here. So I'm just going to create a spline from there down to there, stretch it out, and then back up. So that is the basics of our boat. So if I turn the grid off, go to perspective, just get rid of the grid off that as well, I can then apply a surface modifier and see if that skins it. Now it does, but it's inverted at the moment, so I can flip the normals and I've got a rough basics of my boat. Now the problem is that it's not very detailed, so I'm going to turn that up a little bit, but still we don't actually get the curvature around here. So what I want to do is I want to create a another line going from this point, because there's a vertex here, from there to there, and then back round to here. Now to do that quite easily and to see the surface in action, I can basically show end result in the line. I'm going to drop the level of steps down to 5 in this one, because as I'm going to be using grid snap, vertex snap, it may try and snap onto, it's trying to snap onto various places in the actual boat geometry now, which obviously I don't want. I basically just want to create a line to bring this out a little bit from this point here down to this point there, and then from this point here up to that point there. Oh, wrong one, so I need to reposition this guy. Let's just select him, and then reposition to there. So what we need to do obviously is go back and flip this back. Now we've got the basics of the hull, but we obviously need to curve it off at the bottom and or at the sides as well. Now the way Surface Tools actually constructs the surface geometry is by using threshold values, the distance between your vertices. Now it's obviously good to have the vertices in exactly the same point, hence using vertex snap, but the vertices don't need to be welded together, they just need to be within this threshold level, hence having 2 additional splines which are branching off from the midpoint on this one spline. Now normally you can't normally create shapes this way and get them to create 3-dimensional objects. For example, in using an extrude modifier, you won't be able to produce this kind of result because it would be in a legal shape. So to get this kind of curve, what I want to do is I want to basically, because I've got 4 vertices selected here, which should give me 3, my mistake, but 1 in the center and the other 2. I want to take that down to 2, so I can basically amend the handle going across there, so I can just create another handle going across there so I can curve it easily. Spam mail popping up. So all I want to do is, because I've got 1 in the middle point, it won't weld to the other 2, so all I want to do really is just weld those 2 together. I've got those 2 handles, so all I want to do now is just select that one from let's go to the left viewport there. I'm going to convert that to a corner, and then I'm going to convert it back to a beche so that I can literally scale this in the y-axis, and this should give me a pretty even result. It's one-sided at the moment, so I'm just going to bring this in slightly. Obviously it's slightly off, basically because I've modelled it slightly off center. However, what I can obviously do is I can obviously use a symmetry modifier, which if I do it in the y-axis, it will obviously mirror one side to the other, so I get a perfect symmetrical result. Obviously I want to create like a depth inside the boat, so I'm just going to ditch the symmetry for the minute and then go back to the line, and then what I want to do is I'm just going to literally scale the boat, create an exact copy of it but a scaled version of it, just like that. So I'm just going to do a copy, select the original one, actually go to the other one, ditch that surface because otherwise I won't be able to merge it because it'll think it's geometry. Go back to the line, then I want to attach this set of splines to it. So if I go to the surface now, it's going to look like it's fighting at the moment, because what I want to do is I need to tell the surface modifier that these 2 sets of splines are actually connected, and to do that, this is when the vertex snap comes into its own. So what I want to do, I want to turn off the surface, turn off showing result for the minute, and then I want to create line going from this vertex to that vertex. Then I can right click to cancel any further vertex creation going out from that particular spline there. Create one there, going to that point, from there going to that point, and from there going to that point. See, that's gone out slightly. Let's do that one again. There to there. Lovely. Okay, so when I go to the surface now, fingers crossed, we should have our little boat hull. So that's method, well, 1 of 2 or 2 of 3 or whatever. One way of creating kind of more complex shapes. You can create some really nice organic shapes with this, like for example car bodies like Audis and Beetles and that kind of thing, with nice sweeping curves and everything, that kind of thing. One way to check to see whether or not you do have any kinks in your mesh, if we collapse this entire, I'm just going to literally just duplicate this guy, turn off my snap, I'm going to copy it, let's just call it boat collapsed, and that one is just going to, I'm just going to call it boat. So if I collapse this entire thing to an editable poly, we can see exactly what this boat is made up of. It's actually made up of a lot of tries. Now the reason it's made up of a lot of tries is because this surface modifier was constructed from try three-sided lines. So we've got one side there, one side there, one side there. So basically it's creating a patch to fill in that hole using a three-sided patch. However, if we scoot across to the top, you'll notice that in this object here we've got quads across the top here. Now the reason behind that is because if we go to this object, we've basically got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides here. So the result, if we basically mesh smooth this, we do get some mesh pinching. You see this little highlight here, that's basically a problem in the mesh pinching. So if we render this out, we may get, just switch to perspective, we may get some problem smoothing areas around this particular, there we go, we've got some problem smoothing areas around that particular point. So to fix that, we're going to have to do some pretty heavy mesh editing to basically convert this from quads, from tries to quads, because mesh smooth does tend to work best using using quads. You can see straight away there that there is some issues around the top. Obviously it's not apparent in this spline cage version. However, if we are just dealing, if we don't need to mesh smooth, then we don't need to really worry too much about it, because we can literally just go through and crank up the amount of steps and then render it out, and we get a pretty nice clean result, and we don't need to worry about mesh smoothing at all. However, again, if you're basically modeling out an object from scratch and you can basically get away with using quads, get away with quads. I mean, what you may want to do is just literally take the amount of steps down to a low value, maybe down even to 2, copy the result, collapse it to an editable poly, and then we can basically we can clean this up relatively easily, because we can just simply go, okay, you're basically 2 tries, we can get rid of you, we can get rid of, let's try that one again, so we can get rid of you, we can get rid of you as well, so, or even maybe that one, and maybe just have 2 sets of tries at the top, at the front here. So the amount of tries that we can literally reduce is obviously getting more favourable. So let's try and get rid of that one, and that one. By holding control and hitting backspace, we can literally just take them out. So we've now converted quads to tries. So if we mesh smooth that, this front end bit would be okay. Same principle on this top area here. What we can do is literally, we don't need, if this is just a flat surface here, we don't need this amount of detail, we don't need this extra line, these extra 2 sets of polygons here. All we really need to do, we can just click that, click one edge, click loop, it basically loops all the way around. Any continuous edge loops that go all the way around an object or all the way through an object, as long as it doesn't break off. For example, this will basically not, it will stop there because it branches off into multiple points. It will carry on going to about there because it will stop branching. See, it won't loop any further. It should loop across ways to about there. There we go, yeah, because it branches off there. That one won't branch neither, but this one, because it's a quad, again, this is the benefit of using quads as well, so we can basically loop all the way around to us, well, until it starts branching off again. So this one here will go all the way around. We can literally remove this by either clicking on the remove button, or we can literally do it by holding down control and hitting backspace. And what that basically does, it removes edges without actually deleting the polygons. If we literally just clicked backspace, if we literally just clicked delete, it will basically delete the entire edge itself, the polygons themselves. Now you can actually remove edges just by hitting backspace itself, like so. However, what that does is that it keeps the vertices where they actually were. You see this guy is still remaining here. If I undo that operation, go back to edge subobject, hold down control and hit backspace, go to vertex subobject mode, you'll notice that the vertex is gone. We don't need the vertex. If we remove the edge, we can just literally take the vertex out as well. So it just is a cleaner version of removing the edge just by hitting backspace and then having to go. So all you had to do previously, we had to go around and target weld every single one to remove the verts, because otherwise you can get what's now, because as we have removed the edge, we have now got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6-sided polygon here. So if you mesh smooth that, you're going to get some really nasty pinching. So by removing it cleanly, by using Alt backspace or using the remove tool, then it's going to be a cleaner result. So actually, sorry, the remove tool leaves the vertex in. So using a control backspace is obviously the most advisable solution for you. Okay, so I'm just going to kill that, and we'll leave these two versions up in the file so you can actually see the difference between the two. So I'm just going to save that out. Let's call that surface. So let's call that modeling surface tools. And then what we'll do now is we'll create a rough polygon version of this using standard box modeling techniques. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box to start with, just roughly about the right size and about roughly about the right height on it. So to start with, I'm going to start with very little amount of segments, thinking about which segments that we need. So we basically need one going across the middle there, going across the middle there as well. So I need one going across there, need one going across there. So in the front viewport, sorry, in the let's go to the front viewport there. So what I can do is I can basically pull these edges in. If I go to the edit polygon, you don't really need to use edit mesh anymore. Edit mesh is kind of obsolete, so we just use edit poly now. And then I can grab all three at the bottom, and then I can scale horizontally. So we get a rough representation of the boat. Then in the left viewport, let's just make sure I just didn't do any commands there. Within edit poly, just interjecting, so one thing within edit poly which is a pain in the backside is that the there's a new set of keyboard shortcut commands which can override your viewport commands. So what I'm going to suggest you do is, if you do use a viewport commands, then I would basically say to show the extras. If we can just bring this up, if it will let me. It's not going to let me for the minute because I've got my viewport resized anyway. So I'm just going to change viewports this way. So I'm just going to go to the left viewport there, and then I'm going to scale this horizontally as well. So obviously I've got like a rudimentary shape. I'm still sticking with quads. I've not changed that. So I'm going to go to the top viewport now, and I want to kind of bring these corners in as well. Just make sure I've got everything. I'll deselect that guy there. So I want to bring these in a little bit, and then bring them in a little bit as well. So I've got this kind of oval shaped formation. Again, selecting these guys, I'm holding down Control and pressing the left mouse button, and then I can move these guys up just a touch, including you and you. Just to get a bit of curvature on there. Okay, I think that'll suffice once I've got these guys in. Okay, I think that'll do. So if I mesh smooth this, then we're going to get a pretty gnarly result to start with, basically because we need to, it looks like a big blob, we need to obviously refine edges to basically pull the mesh smooth to the edges, and also to create this kind of curvature as well. So with this mesh smooth already enabled, I'm going to just add an extra iteration on there as well. I'm going to go back to my edit poly, and I'm going to turn on show end result. So what I want to do now is I want to go through and I want to show the cage. So this is my low polygon cage, and the result is obviously this smooth blob in the middle. So first things first is I want to go in and I want to refine this shape around the horizontal. So I basically want to go through, select all these edges, and I want to connect them to add more detail. Okay, and then what I can do is I want to expand them. So what I can do is just scale out just subtly to expand it out a little bit in one direction and in the other direction as well. Now that's not obviously done anything to the front here because it's kind of pulling around. So what I want to do is I want to refine this edge around here, so I can A, inset, and B, create some depth. So I think for the most part what I'll do at the moment is I'm just going to turn off mesh smooth, and just as a cheat, what I can do is just get rid of the entire of that cap, and then I'm going to use a modifier called shell, which actually creates a depth. So in essence just create this entire inner part, 0 value for the outer, and I'm going to create an inner value. So that's created like an inner threshold for me. Obviously it's not straight, it's not flat, which obviously I need to edit afterwards, so let's do that now. Edit poly. I can use my selection tools here. There's two types, there's ring and loop. Loop, obviously you select one going in one direction, it'll go in a looping form, so basically like that. Obviously it's not broken, so therefore it's going all the way around the boat. The other direction is I can do it as a ring, so if I select that and go ring, it will go all the way around that way. So what I want to do is I want to create a ring going around all the way around that guy. Okay, now what I can do also is load this particular selection into another sub-object selection. So if I hold down Control and press this guy here, it loads the sub-object selection into the Polygon sub-object. So I can then just go into the Z-axis. I can either use what is it? Where is it? Make planar in a certain axis, like for example like that. Or what I can do is I can basically just scale down by hand down to, I prefer to do it this way, so I've got more, I know exactly what I'm getting and I've got more control in it. Next thing I need to do, obviously, because the end mesh smooth result is still, we've still got this kind of like little curved edge. We want to flatten it off like this one. So what I need to do here now is I need to tell mesh smooth that it needs to be a lot tighter around certain edges. So this guy, actually I'm just going to pull this, it's a little bit too pointy there, so I want to bring that in just a touch. Again, doing a lot of this by eye. So that guy and that guy I can select loop, ring, it goes all the way around it, and then all I need to do is chamfer the edge just slightly. That's plenty. And then click on OK and come out of sub-object mode, go into mesh smooth, and we've got a nicer, tighter edge to it, and something that is almost comparable to our original boat. I can, if I want to, obviously go back and refine further, such as if I want to pull it in a little bit tighter around here, I can literally just select the edges along this this loop around here and chamfer it a little bit more. So give that a go, select that, loop around. Actually, just let's show end result so we can see exactly what we're going to get. Turn off show cage actually. Go into chamfer, and then it uses the exact same default settings. I can basically chamfer it to bring it to a point. Obviously it's being mesh smooth, so therefore this is the result of the mesh smooth. These two red lines are the result of the chamfer, the selected edges and the result of the chamfer. So I think pull it to about there. Obviously the actual result of this looks like this before it is actually refined, and then mesh smooth refines it, relaxes it, and makes it look like that. Now I don't know about you, but I think that this version looks a lot cleaner, a lot nicer than that one. Obviously because this is using this is using quads and that is using tris. So if I just assign a material to both of these, and then let's put a shiny material on there. This is one way to normally test whether or not you have any problems in the mesh. So I'm just going to select this guy and I'm going to increase the amount of patches. So this is normally a way to see whether or not you have any kinks in the mesh, any problems, because you will instantly see a break in the specular highlight as you pass around, as you pan around the object. If there are any issues, for example here, that specular highlight's not going all the way to the top, so we do have a smoothing and pitching issue there, which is pretty apparent. However, in this version it goes all the way up to the top, over the top and around. So it's a very, very nice clean model that will render out without any problems whatsoever. So let's quickly just create a plane for them to sit on. And then we'll just drop that beneath there. Going to assign a basic material to them. Let's just shove this over here a little bit. And don't worry about this kind of viewport problem that it looks like it's self-intersecting. It's not. It's because of the software viewport display configuration that I'm using. So let's just drop in a skylight. Again, cheating it to hell, but we're only doing it quickly, just for quick display purposes. and I'm going to create a target direct in there just to light them. Let's drop one in there like so, making sure it looks right by increasing the hotspot beam so we can actually make sure that our objects are actually positioned. Let's put the light in. Let's shove it there like that. Okay, then we can position our camera over this side and look at him this direction, going in that direction. So, amend the bias. Let's put that to 1024. Sample range, we'll leave it 4 as well. And then go into perspective mode. And then we'll look at them from this particular point of view. Just reposition that guy so it fills the frame. Show the save frame for presentation. And then we'll quickly just render off this guy and let's see exactly how it looks. Okay, our render's about finished. Just paused it there for you. Just scooted ahead with it. Obviously, it takes a little while, basically because we're using skylight, and the amount of rays per sample is quite high. Plus, we have a fair bit of geometry in the scene because we've got a fair amount of mesh smooth iterations here, which normally looks a little bit like that. So we have a fair amount in there. So what have we got? We've basically got an issue around here with our patch version. Because obviously Surface Tools uses patches and not geometry. Patches are basically geometry with Béchet handles in essence. You can basically contort them quite easily. It's a skill in itself. Personally, they're normally good to model out organic surfaces, like I say, but I personally tend to collapse them down to an editable poly once I've got the shape I want, and then start refining and polygon pushing using editable poly or edit poly. So that basically covers the basics of the different types of modeling that we've got available to it. Obviously there's NURBS as well, but I'm not going to touch that because NURBS is shit, to be perfectly honest. It hasn't been touched in Max for development for God knows how long. If it has, I personally haven't seen it. The actual individual features, I'm just going to save this out. Let's call that Surface Tools and Polygon Modelling. Just going to reset this. Now the basics of modeling is a skill in itself that I'm not going to go full on into, basically because it's, like I say, it's an art form. So it might sound like a big ass cop out, and partially it is, but you need to study what each one of these features does in relation to each other and how to use it. Obviously the basics, which we covered through, we went through all the features within the training, but each one of those, each feature here is actually covered in depth in the manual. So I'd suggest that if you haven't already, you should know pretty much after using AutoCAD what each one pretty much does. Like, you know you're in the vertex subobject mode, you're in create, it creates a vertex, but the thing is it floats, so therefore you need to be able to join it together. Same deal with edges. You can basically create edges going from that vertex to that vertex. You can't do it from that vertex to that vertex because you're going through another edge. So you need to basically insert a vertex on an edge, create a vertex, create an edge going to that vertex you just created. Now that obviously when you refine it will create a problem because there'll be a pinch there, because it's not, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4-sided polygon, even though it's kind of like a bit of a weird 4-sided polygon, and 2 tries. So again, bear in mind when you're actually modeling. Each feature is pretty much self-explanatory. We can obviously remove edges. You can split edges, extrude from edges, which looks a bit odd for the most part. Weld them together using certain threshold values. Chamfer them, which is one of the most common features that you'll actually use, which is great for adding refinement to surfaces and to basically curve things. And let's just loop that if we can. So you can chamfer edges, really easily and quickly and simply. Thing is, obviously, look, if you notice that this particular vertex, if I do this again, is going to go right to the edge there. Now it looks like there's only one vertex in that particular point. There are in fact two, so therefore you obviously need to weld that one and that one, so you've only got two vertices now, one at the top, one at the bottom. Previously we had obviously more. So therefore, when you are polygon modeling, obviously be aware that you can create additional edges and geometry and what would deem to be an unclean model if you're not following what you're doing, if you're not totally careful. You obviously make mistakes to start with, everyone does. For example, if we chamfer this edge here, that is going to be pretty much a bit of a nasty shape. So we've got that there, which obviously now needs cleaning up in some way, shape or form. So we basically have to remove this part, weld that to that, clean that up, and so on. So when you are doing things like this, you obviously need to clean up your geometry afterwards, otherwise you can get totally lost and end up with a model that when you mesh smooth, it looks absolutely fucking awful. So if you try rendering that now, it's like it's been put through a grinder. So that is basically because there is a mixture of quads, trides, six-sided polygons, seven-sided polygons, and God knows what else. So, and overlapping ones, coplanar faces, and everything. So that's the kind of problems that you can encounter when you're polygon modeling. Similar kind of principle unfortunately applies when you are spline modeling. Again, if you are basically creating a surface that has more than four sides, like for example, if I extrude this, it will obviously have and if I mesh smooth this now, I'm going to get some really bad pinching, basically because the way the extrude modifier works, it basically just caps off the entire piece of geometry with a single polygon. Now this polygon has an absolute shed load of faces to it, of edges to it, so therefore it is a very high detailed cap face. So if I mesh smooth it now, watch what happens. We get some really nasty pinching to the edge. Even if we increase the amount of iterations, it still looks like a alien turd or something. I don't know, make up your own mind. But suffice to say, it doesn't create the kind of result that we want. So if we wanted to basically just create a chamfer on the edge to smooth the edge off, to basically get rid of that harsh linear edge, all we really need to do is to go to Edit Poly, go to the edge sub-object, select one edge. Actually, we'll select both of them. We can't loop for some bizarre reason. It determines that this isn't a continuous edge loop going all the way around. So get around that, select the top polygon, select the bottom polygon, select the bottom one, set the top one, right, and then we can, because this is one solid poly, we can basically load this resulting edge sub-object selection by holding down Control and clicking the edge, and then we can literally chamfer the edge on it. Easy. However, Bear in mind that we've still got the same problem. If we mesh smooth it, we're going to have some pinching issues. But for the most part, I wouldn't honestly worry about it, because if that's only a small object, we can pretty much get away with it. There is obviously some smoothing group issue that we need to attend to. So if we get this kind of light jagged effect, then obviously we need to assign either smoothing groups to it manually, automatically, or we can obviously use a modifier to do the same. So we can literally just apply this, tell it to auto smooth, and we basically have a threshold value that we can basically increase to. It's just the way it doesn't actually amend the geometry in any way. It literally just, you can see the polygons haven't actually changed detail at all. It's just that the way Max smooths between one polygon and the next adjacent one, depending on angle threshold. So that's basically the fundamentals of basic polygon modeling in Max. Now, like I say, you really need to go through the manual and double check all the features and everything. So what I would basically suggest is just start off at the beginning, work through the basics like you've done before. I'm not going to cover through every single feature, because that would just simply be going through and repeating the entire manual, which is bloody pointless really. But suffice to say, you will use a few of these tools a lot of the time, and the majority of the tools you will use very, very rarely. For example, don't really use mesh smoother than edit poly. Not much point, because you've got it in a modifier. If you use mesh smooth in edit poly, you've baked it in. You can't get it out. It's in there. It's set in stone. You're fucked if you want to edit it. Same deal with tessellate. Use it as a modifier. It's again these little tips, techniques, and trial and error methods that will only come about, and you'll only get to know how to use them, what you would deem to be correct, out of trial and error and out of practice. Same deal with working with AutoCAD. You've obviously developed skills and trial and error techniques, and what features to use and what features to avoid. Personally, I would say avoid using these. I have no fucking idea why they drop them in. Make planar works for the most part. Boink. Sometimes doesn't. Make planar, which view align, actually collapses it to the current view. That kind of thing. Relax, again, this is actually available as a modifier. If you just want to relax part of the object, you can basically just go like that, and you can relax the geometry quite easily there. Or if you don't want to bake it, because once you've gone into edit poly, you've basically baked it in, you can basically select the sub objects, obviously, and then go to a relax modifier, and it will just perform that operation on that sub object selection. You can then drop in another edit poly and carry on going. Your stack can be as long as you like. It can be absolutely huge. It can go off the screen, doesn't really matter. That's the benefit of working with Max, is that it is totally modifier based. If you haven't welded or created new polygons or new edges or collapsed things in any edit poly here, for example, if it's all just non-destructive modifiers like bends, tapers, mesh smooth, that kind of thing, you can literally edit right at the bottom, and all that information will juxtapose all the way up to the top. So that's the main benefit of working with Max, is because it is totally parametric if you haven't manually edited stuff. If you have manually edited stuff, then you can only drop down so far if possible. Failing that, you can always convert the entire thing to a flat object and start again. But I personally would never, ever, ever, ever collapse your modifier stack unless you really, really need to, because once you've done that and once you've saved it, then you're knackered. Because if you need to go and edit it, then you're up shit creek without a paddle, mate, for use of a better term. So that hereby endeth the lesson. Time for a coffee. 2 sugars, please.